This episode is sponsored by Contentfy, a premium video editing and content repurposing service for busy content creators, influencers, brands, podcasters, YouTubers, and marketers. Contentfy provides unlimited end-to-end editing and repurposing services to help you get your video and audio content edited and repurposed quickly, easily, and reliably. Join other busy content creators, founders, brands, and marketers who now spend even more time creating while they take care of the rest. You no longer need to worry about spending hours editing anymore. Just create content, build your audience, and grow your business. If you're a content creator looking to save time and money, or looking to outsource your content marketing team, get your first free video edited now at contentfy.co. If you'd like to sponsor the SaaS District podcast or recommend any guests that you think would be valuable to be on the show, visit horizoncapital.com/SaaS-podcast today. Thanks again, folks. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Akil Jabbar, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS District. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how a founder bootstrapped a successful IP geolocation SaaS, starting from a side hustle to now growing over 50% year over year. So today we have our guest, Ben Dowling, joining us. Ben is the founder and CEO of IPinfo.io and Host.io, a reliable, in-depth source of IP addresses, data handling roughly 20 billion API requests per month for 100,000 businesses and developers. Ben was the former CTO at com.com, worked at Facebook as a software engineer, as well as various other startups across the UK. So welcome, Ben. Super excited to have you on SaaS District Show today.
Thanks, Akil. Excited to be here.
So we always like to start off, love to hear a little bit about your background, just kind of quick background. What have been your past ventures, entrepreneurial journey, including, I think you found a company called Geonium?
Yep, Geonium, that's right. That was back in London, I guess it would have been 2009. I worked at a startup before then. As an employee, I think I was the second hire there. Enjoyed that a lot. I would have been, 25 at the time. Just threw myself into the startup life. Working every hour that I was awake, working weekends. Learning a bunch. It was growing rapidly. And enjoyed it, but thought, hey, I'm an employee here. I'm spending all my time on it. I was the sort of leading the tech team there at the time, and thought, hey, how hard could it be? I could just do this myself, and sort of thought I'd love to do my own startup at some point. And met someone who had a bunch of ideas for a startup in mobile phone location-based space, and that was at the time, I think maybe it was the iPhone 3 or something around then, right? And so I've been doing some mobile apps on the side, and thought, hey, this would be fun. And I had a 3-month-old baby at the time. I was living in a flat in London, and I was like, hey, do you think I should go do a startup? It seems kind of crazy, but my wife was super supportive. It was like, you should just do it, right? You're going to regret it if you don't. Just kind of take the leap. And so I took the leap, and I worked on Geonium for maybe it's almost 12 months. We raised a very small amount of seed money, enough for us to kind of sort of pay the rent for 6 months. Launched a mobile app, got a bunch of good reviews, got some early traction. It was a lot of fun. We never found any sort of business model for it. We never got to a sort of breakout level of traction for consumer startups. But it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot through that process. But it's when we ran out of the seed money, and it was when the credit card debt was racking up, and it was then it's like, okay, well, I've got to go find some consulting gigs or see what I can do. And then I ended up at Lightbox, which was a venture-backed mobile startup in London at the time. And we started working on a photo sharing app for Android. This is at the time that Instagram was really cool. It was iPhone only. And there weren't many good apps on Android at the time. And so we were working on a great photo sharing app. There were a few photo sharing apps, but nothing that was sort of anywhere near as good as Instagram. And so based on I think basically the pent up demand for Instagram that didn't exist on Android, I think we got 3 million downloads within a few months. We were the top Android app in the Play Store for a while, and we weren't too worried about Instagram launching on Android because a few other big popular iPhone apps had launched on Android, and things would crash, and we thought, hey, we've got the Android expertise. We've got a head start. Even if Instagram does launch on Android, I'm sure it'll be buggy and it won't work. And maybe that kind of cements our position as the number one photo app on Android. And then Instagram launched, and it was better than our app. And and so we were like, okay, this is not what we wanted. Well, I mean, a really fun lesson I learned from that was that we'd spent months and months perfecting. So on Android, when you rotate it from portrait to landscape, I don't know if it's the same today, the app would just get restarted, right? So it just doesn't re-render it. It sort of restarts the app. And when you're doing photo processing, you've got a bunch of stuff in memory, and so it's really tricky for us to rotate. To do a bunch of code handling. Okay, you rotate the phone from landscape to portrait. At the time, a lot of Android apps, if you rotated them, they would crash, and all the photo apps would, because that was really tricky. And we totally nailed it. The Android team at Lightbox had really nailed this, spent months on it, and we'd had it, and we were so proud of this. You could rotate from portrait to landscape, and it wouldn't crash. And so any time a new app launched, we tested. We're like, yeah, it crashes. These guys haven't solved this problem. And as soon as Instagram launched, we tested it. We put it into landscape mode. We waited for the crash, and they made it a portrait-only app. And so they just bypassed this whole problem. It didn't crash, but didn't go in landscape. But who cared, right? I thought that really was a big lesson for me. That actually the users of the app don't care, right? They don't care if it's a landscape app. They don't care if it's portrait. They just want their app to work. And you can make this 5-minute decision like, hey, we only support portrait mode, like job done, right? Whereas we'd spent months figuring out all these really difficult technical details on how to make sure it works in landscape mode. We're really proud of that, and there was some good work around it. But in the end, it didn't help us build the best app, right? That's time that could have been spent making the product better elsewhere. So that was fun, lesson learned there. And then the whole team, we wound up at Facebook, and so I moved out from the UK then to the Bay Area, and that was cool. So we had to wait for our H-1B visas, and so I managed to take a few months off and did some traveling around Italy with my wife and young daughter at the time. Then we moved to the US. And I was at Facebook for a couple of years as a software engineer. I sort of shifted. A bunch of the team went to work on the photos at Facebook, and some went to work on Instagram. Because around that same time, they were acquired by Facebook, and so some of the guys that were working at Lightbox went to work on Instagram. I sort of changed track and set up on the ads integrity team, and so that was a lot of fun learning about all the sort of scammy ads on Facebook and all the shady corners of the internet, the diet pill scams and all these weird things. Learning a lot about those, learning how we can stop them, how we can automatically detect them, how we can kind of clean up some of the ad ecosystem in Facebook. I had a lot of fun with that, and a lot of that was really interesting. And then left Facebook to be CTO at Calm for a couple of years. And so I knew Alex, the founder of Calm. We were friends in London. We did a few side projects together, little ones, and we stayed in touch. He moved to America a few years before me. He had a full-time role, and then he'd been working on Calm as a side project. And in those few months where I'd been, traveling around Italy before we got to get the US visa and move to the US, I did some contracting work for him on Calm and build out some of the synchronous meditation features and some bits for the site. And we stayed in touch. And after a couple of years at Facebook, I was thinking about what kind of thing I could do next. And Calm was still very, very early at that point. It had next to no revenue. It had an app that would crash all the time. They had these super passionate users that, despite the fact that the app was not a very smooth experience, lots of users that would email in and say, hey, look, this app's changed my life. I'm sleeping better. People say, hey, this has saved my marriage. People saying, hey, this is, I'm off drugs because of this. And obviously, it wasn't everybody's story. Lots of people were frustrated with the app, but the fact that it could have this effect in some people's life, I thought was pretty incredible. And so, and it's clear that with an app that didn't crash all the time, that actually solves some of these issues, the impact could be much, much more profound. And so, then I joined Calm as CTO. Was there for a couple of years. During that period, went from hundreds of thousands to tens of millions in revenue. Grew really, really fast. That was a really fun time. But during this time, I've been working on IPinfo as a side project. And so at some point, it got to the point where it was just IPinfo was demanding more and more of my time, and I decided to at that point to say, hey, look, I want to go focus on IPinfo full time at this point and see what I can make of it.
Cool, cool. So I want to dig down into a couple of points there. So you started off, Geonium. That was kind of project you co-founded. Then you went, you have a baby. You've got to feed, change diapers, pay the bills.
Yeah.
Obviously, you went back, got a job, right? Lead engineer at Lightbox. They got acquired by Facebook. Now you're working as a software engineer. So you made that transition from working as an entrepreneur, which is kind of your dream and kind of what you're hoping for, deciding to go back to the workforce. What was that kind of experience like for you? Did you feel defeated? Did you feel lost? Or were you like, okay, I'm just going to do this for a little bit and I'm going to try something new all over again? And you knew that you had to come back.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think the a bit of both. I think I certainly didn't go from like doing Germium and then go back to like a corporate soul sucking job, right? Where it's I like Lightbox was really exciting, really dynamic. You were doing a lot of fun stuff. We had a really great team, and so I love working there. It definitely did feel a bit like a defeat, though. At the point where I was committed to like, hey, I'm going to go do a startup. While doing it for myself at Germany and working for myself, I just loved the freedom, the flexibility. I was working remotely, working from coffee shops, working from the library. Had my own schedule. So got to spend time with my wife and daughter, and then would work, all through the night or whatever. And so I loved that sort of freedom and the, hey, I'm only sort of really accountable to myself here. And really enjoyed that. And so when I then had to go and get a job, there were some of those elements that I lost. But then when going to do IPinfo full time, I was able to recapture some of those, right? And so, IPinfo, we've been fully remote, fully distributed team from the start. I guess most companies are now during COVID, but that was intentional, and that wasn't hey, this is the best way to start a company. I think there are lots of arguments for it being a great way to start a company, but for me, it's just like, hey, this is how I want to operate, right? Like I don't want to have to go into an office every day. I want to be able to hire anybody from around the world and have them operate on whatever kind of time schedule they want, or with whatever flexibility they want. And so it was kind of there were elements. I was really lucky to land a great job at Lightbox and work on an exciting project, but it was definitely in some ways it felt like at the start, I'm like, wow, this is it. I'm never going to work for anybody ever again, right? I'm just now I'm an entrepreneur. I get to do whatever I want, and so it was a bit of a step back, and took some adjustment in some ways, but was also a great, really fun project that I was able to throw myself into as well. So that was great.
And can you, in terms of, when you decided to start IPinfo, came back to the entrepreneur field, started building this on the side. What was that process of, the idea stage where what was the opportunity and problem you were looking to solve in the market that you saw clearly needed a solution?
Yeah, so I didn't at all. So it started as so I've always been interested in just working on side projects. Just some for just engineering curiosity. Like, is this something I could build? Is this something I could ship? Some more problem focused. This is a problem the user's going to have. With IPO, it was to help me with some of my other side projects. And so I've been using geolocation data in a bunch of projects, setting some up. And it was just a hassle. You'd have to download some data files, upload it to a server. They would get outdated and you'd have to update them. And so by the time I did this, the fourth or fifth time, over a period of, maybe it was a couple of years, I just thought, I don't have to do this again, right? And so why don't I just do this on one server, wrap it in a simple API? It'd be really useful for me, save me having to do this. I can just do this properly once this weekend, and then I kind of never have to do it again. Probably be useful for other people. I never necessarily thought of it as, hey, there's a business here or a market opportunity. It's just like, this would be really useful for me. There'll be other people that probably find it useful. And went and posted about it on Stack Overflow. I was like, hey, fellow developers, right? Here's a much easier way to kind of get geolocation data. It's a free API. There was no paid plans initially. It was completely free. I think it was on a $5 a month server. And so it's, hey, I'm using it. Could be useful for you. Go and use it. But very, very quickly, it started getting a lot of traction. And I think I remember I was getting the bus to work, and I got a text message or something saying, hey, there's an issue with the server. The CPU is pegged or something. And I thought, I don't know if I've written a bug or something's gone wrong. And connect into the server, and I see that the server's getting millions of hits at that point.
Wow.
And, I think from my projects, I was calling it a few hundred to a few thousand times a day, right? And it was suddenly getting these millions of hits from these projects. And I thought, wow, it's great they're using it a lot, but now I need to upgrade the server. It's going to start getting more expensive. I wonder if people are using it millions of times a day, if they might consider paying for it. And my wife was like, hey, why don't you just go launch paid plans? And I was like, well, I don't know if it's worth the effort of building out support for paid plans. I don't know if anybody's going to pay. And she said, well, just ship it and see what happens. And so I did. And very, very quickly, people started paying. And the things have just kind of very organically evolved from there. And so we would add, obviously refined paid plans a lot since then, refined the service. We've got lots of feedback from customers saying, hey, we love what's in your API right now. Could you help us with this other data set? And so over many, many years, we've built out additional data sets. We've refined the data. We've improved the data. We put a lot of effort into the data sets. Like I said, initially, I was just downloading what I could download on my server and just wrap an API around it. Since then, we now got a whole data engineering team that are focused on building out your own proprietary data sets and improving the accuracy. But initially, that was obvious, right? It was like, hey, it's an API, right? And so, it evolved sort of very organically from there. But there was definitely no, I personally had a very clear problem, right? Like, hey, this sucks, the way that I'm doing it. I can make it easier for me. It could be easier for other people. I certainly didn't do this, here's a framework for how I'm thinking about, the market and how they might pay. It was just like, it felt very natural to be like, well, if someone wants to pay, I would just charge them monthly. They're making requests. Our pricing models evolved. But that was how it all started.
Makes sense. I love it. So it was kind of a mistake. You built it as a project for yourself, posted it, it got traction, and then you turned it into a full-time project. You were working on IPinfo as a side project. While working at Com, how much time were you really dedicating to this? And then, over time, what was your schedule like at Com? And when did you decide eventually, look, I need to go all in and work full-time on IPinfo? What was the decision-making process there?
Sure, yeah. So, initially, the time I spent on IPinfo was fairly sporadic, right? I launched it over a weekend, and then we'd spend some time posting on Stack Overflow, right? And that was kind of it. And as it started getting more traction, and then maybe I wouldn't work on it for a few months, then it's like, oh, let's launch some paid plans. And so maybe evenings for a week or two, I might set up billing integration, all that stuff. But my job at Com was pretty demanding as well, right? I was working a full-time job, more than a full-time job, right? It was an early stage startup, and so I was spending a lot of hours on Com. And so I wasn't initially spending much time on IPinfo. There would be sprints where I did, it's like, oh, hey, I want to ship this new feature. But what that forced, not having much time really forced me to be sort of super lean, right? And to really focus on what was important and what was not. And I talked about, the early days at Lightbox where I spent all that time making it horizontal or portrait and support for that. And it turns out like, you can just hit a flag when you're building it and say, hey, lock this to portrait mode, save 6 months of work, right? That ended up being irrelevant work in the end. And so taking that mindset and having limited time really, really forced me to say, hey, what actually matters, right? And it's like the people are paying us for an API that doesn't go down, that's low latency, that's reliable, and just focusing on delivering on that value proposition. And so like nothing else, we didn't have anything else. People wanted to update their credit card. So I didn't even have a user database initially, right? We had Stripe on the back end for billing. And so there was just Stripe. There was no user database. There was no nothing. And so if people would email me and say, hey, I need to change my credit card, I would just like create a one-time link where they could go and it would show them a Stripe form, and that would just go and update Stripe. Like me personally, I was the billing dashboard, the account dashboard, all that stuff. People said, hey, I need to debug some requests. I'd go and run a database query and email it to them. And so, not much of my time was spent. The time that I did spend was on sort of customer support and things, right? And so, but even that was there wasn't much of that, right? There may be a few emails a week. And then what happened over time was, more and more of my time would be spent on customer support. So I would commute up from Mountain View up to San Francisco. I was at Com on the Cow train. It's about an hour and a half maybe on the train. And so, I would, as IPinfo was getting more demanding, I would always work on the train. And so I get my laptop out, I would answer a few support emails, and then jump on with some work. And then it would get to the point where over many months, I would get into San Francisco and I still hadn't answered all the support emails, right? And it's like, wow, there's even more to go. Before it take me 5 minutes, then it'd be taking me all day. And so, at some point then I hired someone to help with the support, which took that burden off. But it got to the point where, and those support emails some of them were business opportunities as well, right? People would email me and say, hey, can I jump on a call? I want to buy an enterprise plan off you. And I'd be like, there's no enterprise plans. Just go into your credit card on the website. I've got no time to talk to you. And so that was like a really great constraint in those early days. So it's like, so I've got, 10 hours a week and my spare time to spend on IPinfo. That's it. There's no point going and building a whole billing dashboard. That's going to take me 6 months and it's probably going to be pretty lame at the end of it, right? Why don't I just say, hey, need a billing issue? Send me an email. And if I get a few of those emails a month, like it's a lot less time than I'd spend on other things. And so that kind of constraint was really helpful, I think, on us dialing in what's actually important, what people care about, and getting that initial traction. But after a couple of years at Calm, it got clear that all the support issues are coming on the way to the train. And then the more and more requests from users, not just on, hey, can we buy this off you? Hey, can we want higher volumes? Hey, can you offer IP to company data sets? Can we've noticed some issues with the geolocation accuracy here. And so it's clear to me at that point that there's not only an opportunity to do a lot more work here, there's an opportunity to turn this into a real business, right? There's enough need and demand out there. There's enough people finding us and coming to us. Because initially I wasn't sure, hey, yeah, this is a great side project, right? It's bringing in revenue. It's fun to work on and spend 10 hours a week on. But I thought that may be it, how much can this, how big an opportunity can this be? But I think it was pretty clear after a while that there was that opportunity there. I just had to choose, is this something that I want to spend my time on and focus on? I was having a lot of fun on it. It was a really interesting problem space. I think we were in a good position. So at that point, it's okay, yeah, let's go focus on this full time.
Was there a certain milestone or whether, number of users or dollar amount that once you hit that, it's okay, I replaced my income and that was it? Or was there something else that drove you to that? Was the customer support or what?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think there are different things on different sites. So one thing was I really wanted to help Calm get to a point where they had a really solid, really great app. And so I think after a couple of years, I kind of felt that I'd be leaving them in a really solid place. That their issues with the app crashing and they were left in a great place. They had a great team of engineers in place at that point. And so I didn't feel not that my work there was done, but I kind of felt I'd be leaving at a natural kind of inflection point where all that kind of early work had been kind of mostly wrapped up. And then also IPinfo was getting to a point where it clearly needed more time and attention, right? And I could have made the choice to be look, this is all IP was going to do, and it could have carried on to be a side project. But it's clear to me at that point that there was an opportunity to really focus on it and do a lot more stuff. And so I think it was both of those, right? On the one side, it's there's a bunch of important work to do at Calm. I felt I'd sort of wrapped a lot of that up, and we're leaving that team in a really good place. And then it's on IPinfo. My list of things I could maybe do someday, right? Initially, it's if I had a free weekend, I could get through this list. Then it's if I had a team of 10 people in 2 years, maybe we could get half of this stuff done. At that point, it's okay, this needs some more time.
Got it. And where are you guys in terms of size today? What would you say has worked best in terms of leading to that successful growth so far? You mentioned getting on Substack. Any other ways where after that, was there any other traction areas you saw that real growth?
Yeah, so almost all of our initial growth, I think, came from Stack Overflow, right? Where people, and I would spend a lot of time in the early, sitting on the train, searching for any Stack Overflow question about, hey, how do I get a user IP address in JavaScript? And I'd say, hey, I've just launched this API, right? It's free, it's really useful. Here's the code you could use, right? And you really spend time answering those questions, and that drove a lot of initial usage. And then I would find that actually also helped drive product development, because I would find questions, initially it's okay, yeah, how do I get someone's IP location in PHP? And so I'd go and answer that. But then I'd sort of answered all the questions around that, right? There were no new ones to be answered. But then people would say, how can I find out what the ISP is of an IP address? And I'd be like, that's a really interesting question. I wonder, right? Is this something that we can go solve, right? And then we'd go build that. Sometimes that was very easy. Sometimes that might take 6 months of work, but then I would know that there's demand for it, right? I know that people are asking this question. Maybe there weren't good answers, or the answers were, hey, here are the 15 steps where you can kind of go and do this. And it's if I can make that one step, it's just call our API and you get the answer. That would be helpful. And so that also sort of led some of our product development, where it's hey, this would be a fun problem to solve. I know that people find this useful. People are asking this question. And then we'd find a bunch of other, related Stack Overflow questions and answer those. So that was a big initial driver. After that, and still to this day, right? We still get a lot of traffic from Stack Overflow. We've done a bunch of other things since then. So I think one thing that's been really effective for us, a big kind of industry that we're growing in and have grown in for a while, is cybersecurity. That was somewhat surprising for me, but one year I got I think I got an email from 2 or 3 customers all asking me like, hey, you're going to be at Black Hat in Las Vegas this year, big cybersecurity conference. And I had no plans to be, but like three customers, and there are three of my larger customers that already emailed me and asked. And I thought, well, even, if we don't get any new business from it, just to meet these three customers, say hey to them, it'll be a worthwhile trip. I found 10 other customers that were in a similar industry and emailed them and said, hey, you're going to be there. And 5 were like, hey, yeah, would love to meet. And then went to Black Hat, and just wore an IPinfo hoodie and had like 3 or 4 people come up to me and say, hey, I've seen IPinfo, would love to use you. And that's been really great to sort of be, as going to the conference, not like helped a little bit, but I think being part of that community where, we met with customers and they're like, oh, wow, we love your API. It's great to put a face to it, and then some of those customers have become sort of advocates and, introduced us to other companies that may be looking for a provider. So that's been really useful. We've seen a lot of Twitter engagement for people in that sort of industry as well. So whether it's sort of like industries where there's small communities and they're happy to share and find a good solution, so that's been a good driver for us as well.
Super cool. So you've hit some kind of great growth here from what you're saying, 50% year over year. Why the decision to kind of bootstrap, and what was kind of the thought process behind, you built this from scratch and then, started getting traction, you went full time. Why not at that point look for outside capital for, kind of fueling that growth and, hiring that team you needed to really accelerate it?
Sure, yeah. So I think some of that comes back to the history with Germium and then Lightbox, right? And so with Germium, we raised a very small amount of seed funding, but it sort of ran out after 6 months. And then we're like, well, hey, we're stuck. We've got to go find contracting gigs, got to do something else. Now, had we have had longer, could we have maybe made something of it? Potentially. I also think had we have not of one thing I've done with IPinfo is not say, hey, I've got this new idea. I'm going to spend 6 months and see if we can make it successful or not. And then if not, got to go do something else. It's very organically like layering on top of each other, right? And so that way there's sort of like infinite runway, right? Then, and the expectations can change as it evolves. There's no sort of like time boxing of like, okay, we've got, let's raise some money. We've got 12 months to get to the traction level to here. Otherwise, we've got to sell it or close it down or something. It's like, we may say, hey, we want to get to here, ideally in 12 months. If it takes 2 years, fine. If it takes 4 years, fine. If it takes 6 months, great. And so, I think being bootstrapped just gives us full freedom to sort of figure out what the right pace is for us, to figure out, what markets we want to explore, to figure out, basically anything we want to, right? There's no time pressure. Or no external time pressure. There's no, and so we've got complete control of our destiny. And so, I think we probably won't raise ever. I wouldn't rule it out. But I think we're bootstrapped. We're profitable at this point. We're growing at a pace we're happy with. And so, it's not clear to me that an injection of capital is necessarily going to change our trajectory. And so we're kind of pretty happy with how things are.
So 50% year over year growth, that's quite good. That's very respectable. That's really nice. If it continues to that, or if you guys find ways to continue to grow it, there's always pros and cons of raising versus bootstrapping. Any tips or suggestions maybe you could share for those in our audience? Maybe they're looking to bootstrap their next idea, or they're also, contemplating the idea of raising capital, because you've done both, maybe pros and cons of each, and any other tips for them?
Yeah, so I think, the downside to bootstrapping obviously is like, it just takes a lot longer, right? This was a side project for many years, without me spending much time on it, and so you just have to be, I think, much more patient. But I also think, the bonus is, it just means you have to sort of like plant those seeds earlier. I'd worked on a bunch of different side projects, many with big ambitions for them that never became anything, some with, like IPinfo, hey, this will be useful, but I don't know if it will be a business, and turned out to be a great one. I think, the knowing that, hey, this could take years before, it gets to a point where, it could be a business, or, could be generate revenue or whatever, and just kind of experimenting and doing a lot of different things you're interested in, and saying, hey, this could take many years. Obviously the big benefit with raising capital is it kind of focuses you like, hey, I get to spend my full time on this for 12 months, 2 years, whatever the runway is. But that could be it. At the end of 2 years, if we've not got certain milestones, we've not got certain things, we may have to start again from scratch. And so what I really like about the bootstrap thing is it kind of takes that starting from scratch off the table, right? It's like, well, hey, we may need to, maybe we don't grow as well as we'd hoped this year or over the next few years, but like, there's no starting from scratch, right? We just, get to take our time on it, fix things that we think need fixing, and, just play for sort of the really long term.
Makes sense. Yeah, I guess if you can afford kind of to build this over, committing to it for a long term, then maybe, Bootstrap makes sense. But I think a lot of people maybe think I need to go all in on this. They'll bootstrap it themselves, put everything in. Might take longer than you actually think, right? Maybe it always does.
Yeah. That's definitely the trade-off, I think, is the sort of the time it takes. You see people raise money and then they can hire a bunch of really smart people, and that definitely, I think, can increase your chances of making something successful, right? But it also kind of ups the bar of where you need to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to chat a little bit more about IPinfo itself, the product. How are you guys kind of innovating the product? And tell us, how does your technology stand out from any of the other IP data providers out there right now?
Yeah, sure. So initially, I talked about the background of IPinfo, right? It was just like, hey, I downloaded some data set, wrapped it in an API. And so initially, that's all we were. Our whole innovation and our differentiator was, hey, if you want IP geolocation data anywhere else, you've either got to download a data set, set it up on a server, or you've got to pay for an expensive, hard to use API. And they weren't good options. And I want, hey, let's make a free, really easy to use API that's quick and reliable. And so for the first few years, while this was a side project, that's where we innovated. That's where we kind of got our foothold and where we got all our initial growth. But then it was becoming clear that we would get feedback from people saying, but hey, your data, you're saying I'm in, San Francisco, but really I'm down in San Jose. Can you fix this data for me? And initially I'm like, hey, this isn't our data, right? We just downloaded it. We're an API provider. If you want to fix the data, you can kind of go upstream. But this happened again and again and again. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Actually, there's an opportunity here to fix the data, and we're getting feedback about where some gaps are in the data. And so then we kind of went down a path of, okay, let's just build out our own data that's really world class, high accuracy data. So we stopped getting all this feedback about data being broken. We can just kind of, people be like, oh wow, this is really great. The accuracy is really great. And then we'll get feedback on other data sets as well, right? Hey, you've, like I mentioned, the ISP one, right? What's the ISP? What's the company? Is this IP address a carrier or not? And so, then we thought, hey, instead of just being great at the API piece, and we're sort of established there, let's make sure we've got really great data and world-class data as well. And so that we thought, oh, that should be easy. It should be done in 12 months. That's been, a focus for many, many years now. And it's, it turns out to be a really hard problem, but it's been really fun and rewarding, sort of solving that piece and making lots of progress there. And so, one key thing that differentiates us now is, we have the, really easy to use API. We're really developer friendly, right? That's our roots. It's like, hey, we're just solving problems for developers. But now we also have really great data, and a great data team that's working on this. And so a differentiator between us and other companies as well is that, we have really great, highly accurate data. We update it daily. And we have a bunch of different data sets as well. So like I said, there's the geolocation. We do VPN detection, carrier detection. And so we're really focused on what context can we give you around an IP address. And so I mentioned there's the cybersecurity industry where we're growing, but we do try and be sort of industry agnostic. There are lots of different use cases. There's ad tech, there's marketing, there's website personalization, there's cybersecurity. And we really try and get a lot of feedback from our users on the different ways that they're using it and try and make data sets that are useful across all of those. And they tend to be sort of similar solutions. The one thing we do is IP type detection. So we'll say, given this IP address, is it most likely to be from a hosting provider, an ISP, a business or educational institution? Different use cases, but the same data can be used for different use cases. So, someone that's using a marketing or ad tech may be like, hey, I just want to advertise to people. I don't want to show ads to any automation or whatever. And so they can use that data and say, hey, I want to filter out anything that's not an ISP. But then, a cybersecurity person may have a use case of actually, I just want to look at everything that's from a hosting provider, right? Maybe that's riskier or there's something else. And so we try and work out what are these data sets that we can apply broadly to, all IP address space that also apply to a broad set of use cases. And so, it's been a lot of fun.
And kind of just going specific on those different data sets, and you create a kind of world-class data that's updated daily, kind of use cases specifically for, say, SaaS founders listening in. How can they use that to improve two things? One is what I hear, customer experience. And then also on the sales side, how are you increasing, conversions from the quality of leads? If you can speak about those.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and there's lots you can do on this. And so, if we dive into the IP geolocation data set, so that is one where you give us an IP address and we'll tell you city level accuracy for this IP address. So you may say, hey, this is someone visiting from Seattle. And so depending on your business and what you're doing, there are a bunch of different personalizations you could do with that. One could be a user experience improvement. So if there's anywhere, say on your website, that you're asking the user to give you a location, you could kind of bypass that step. And so you could, say you were a travel industry and it was a flight booking app. You could easily say, if I visited the website, it could say, hey, here are the nearest flights from SeaTac Airport, say. If I was in the UK, the website could just say, here are the nearest flights from Heathrow. It'd be great to give the user a way to override that and say, well, actually, I'm actually going to be flying from a different airport, or maybe I'm on a VPN and it looks like I'm in London, but really I'm in Seattle, and so you may want to do something different there. So it'd be great to give the user a way to override that. But lots of websites you go to, if you go to the IKEA website, I think the first thing that pops up is what country you're in. It's like, hey, I just wanted to order some furniture online. They could use IP geolocation to say, hey, we know this guy's in the US, right? Let's just take him right there, start showing him some furniture. That would not only give the user a better experience, that would probably result in more sales, less frustrated users, and all these things. And so there's that user experience where if you want to know something about the user's location, if you're going to ask them for something, you can just kind of skip that step and jump right into providing value for the user. That's one. Another way you can do that is, instead of personalizing the experience for the user, is using that information to help with marketing. So for example, on a user sign up form, for everybody that signs up, you may want to get their location for our IP geolocation. And then you could say, hey, we had a sign up from a user in Seattle, a user in London. And then various different things you could do with that, right? You may want to automatically send emails based on time of day. If you say, hey, it's better for us to land in this person's inbox at 9 a.m. their local time, rather than it be 4 a.m. or whatever, and then they're going to wake up and we're not going to be at the top of the inbox. And so you could use that. We turn the time zone on our API, and you could do something based on that. You could also, maybe post-COVID, when there's in-person events, you may want to email all users in Seattle and say, hey, we're going to have an event. Come meet up with us. You could also inform where you might want to run events. If you notice that you had 50 signups in Seattle last week, but 5 in London, you may say, hey, let's go do more in Seattle, or maybe we need to be doing more in London to kind of increase the number of users there. So yeah, lots of different things like that. I mean, even sort of user invisible things. So one could be, say you were a book publisher, or you're an author of a book and you wanted to sell your book. You may want to send a user to Amazon, but it's going to be a bad user experience if someone in London goes to Amazon.com and then they've got to either ship it from the US, or they've got to go switch to the UK. It's a really simple personalization where it's like, hey, come buy my book. And that link just goes to the country specific Amazon, right? And you could just use the country location data there and say, hey, if they're from the UK, let's send to Amazon.co.uk. If they're from the US, let's send to Amazon.com. And maybe there's a default that's, go buy them somewhere else if they're not in either of those countries. Makes
sense. Yeah, I love that. Personalization. I think that's where a lot of money in it for any marketer or any company. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. IPinfo.io, guys, check that out if you guys want to try it out yourself. Ben, kind of switching gears here to kind of the rapid fire questions and a little bit more personal here. What's one advice you wish you had known and would tell your, say, 25-year-old self just starting off your entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. At 25, what do I wish I knew at 25? I guess take your time. I think I was around 25 when I jumped in Geomium and was like, hey, let's just do this and figure it out. I think that's the lesson I learned over 10 years and to talk with IPinfo is, hey, there's no rush here, right? You got the rest of your life to work on this. You're kind of in this for the long haul. It's a marathon, not a sprint. That's a lesson I learned over the last 10 years. I think if I had known that at 25, although on the flip side, it's hard to not be like really ambitious and want to get things done really fast when you're 25. But I think maybe that is like slow down, take the time. I think another one is the lesson I learned through Lightbox, where we'd spent 6 months building this. Let's rotate it from landscape to portrait. Is what you're working on, what the customer actually cares about, right? And I definitely to that type info as well, where it's like people actually don't care about a user dashboard, right? If someone wants to change their credit card, they're more than happy for me to just email them a link where they can go and do it. it makes sense to build one at the point that, you're inundated with emails and it's just, hey, let's just spend 10 hours building this instead of 10 hours a week answering those emails. But until you get to that point, users don't care. Users, as long as you're delivering on what they actually care about, right? Which for us was, hey, a fast, reliable API. And so I think, it's very easy to get distracted and build things you think are important or things that other companies are doing. Whereas I think it's really important to try and nail that, the key reason that someone would choose you.
Makes sense. What are some of the biggest challenges you're currently facing in order to grow or to continue to grow IPinfo? Meaning, what keeps you up at night these days?
Yeah, so I think some of the key challenges are, as the organization gets bigger, they change. So we're 15 people now. And so in some ways, we've got a lot more firepower. You can get a lot more done. But then there's a lot more bottlenecks and a lot more communication and things that come with that. And so I think just the challenges shift from being, hey, how do we build great data? They're less sort of problem domain specific and more sort of scaling organization specific. And so how do we make sure that we're communicating effectively? How do we make sure that we're shipping the right things quickly? And you have your higher expectations from customers around reliability. And so how do we take where we're at in the world today, our customers, and use that as an asset rather than it becoming a liability where it's like, okay, now we have all these demands, all these things. And so thinking around that.
It makes sense. Ben, who or what would you say are the best 3 resources? It could be books, maybe people you follow or mentors who you say have been the most instrumental to your success over these last few years?
Cool. I mean, I would say podcasts in general are a huge source of wisdom, knowledge. I'm always walking around with my AirPods in, listening to podcasts. I mean, they're free to listen to, right? There's some amazing, inspirational people on podcasts. I love listening to business leaders and people talking about, how they scaled their company to thousands of people and, how terrible things were in the early days, and, how kind of things work out and, all the missteps and how they corrected things. So I think podcasts are an amazing resource. I think, I just often just go on the podcast app, search for SaaS or founders or whatever. There's lots of great content. So I think podcasts are one. Books, I think obviously another incredible resource. Shoe Dog is one that I read recently. The founder of Nike. And what I loved about that one is he talks as well about, I guess it's very easy. The story often when businesses are very successful is, this was a surefire thing from day one that, these guys are geniuses and know what they're doing. I think it's very interesting going back to the early days of businesses and, looking at Nike, where they were getting sued, like they could have gone bankrupt, like the whole thing was a total disaster. And, any one of 5 or 6 things would have changed. That's would have been what happened, but they kind of made it through that. And that was a really inspiring story that, even these great companies, and I think, clearly, lots of business smarts behind Nike and lots of really great decisions. But even those businesses, chaotic in the early days, there's a lot of luck involved. There's a lot of hard work. And so I love stories like that and books that sort of cover that.
Any favorite books other than that one or podcast that you listen to?
So one of my favorite books is called How to Get Rich. I read this many years ago. It's Felix Dennis, who I don't know if he was a founder of Felix Publishing in the UK, and it's really an autobiography, and it's not really about getting rich. It's kind of about his life story. It's more like why you wouldn't want to get rich. Some of the trials of his life. But that was pretty inspirational. I got he did an event in London where he was reading some poetry and got to get a signed copy from him, which was really cool. But that's an amazing book. I know lots of people that I don't think it's that well known, but I know lots of people that have read it, that love it. There's lots of good wisdom in there, lots of interesting stuff. So yeah, I found that a pretty inspirational book.
Cool. We'll add that link to our show notes for people to check out.
Cool.
Ben, what does success mean to you today? Whether it's personally, financially, business, life, no right answer.
Yeah, cool. So I mean, for me personally, yeah, it's, I guess being able to sort of live life on my terms, right? So I talk about when I was doing Germany, it's like, hey, I can, work from wherever I want, whatever hours I want. And, I sort of set IPinfo up that way. We're a remote team and, all around the globe. And so, I get to spend time with my kids and drop them off at school or whatever, and work late in the evening and work around that. And so that's great. For the business, one thing I really want to do is, make sure that we keep delighting our customers, have that world-class data, really be the guys that, have the expertise and the data and the know-how around IP address data, and build a team that, really like working here, that are proud to work here, make our customers happy, and keep growing that.
Cool. Love it. Appreciate you jumping on SaaS District Show today, Ben. If you want to just wrap up here, kind of what are your future plans for IPinfo, and where can our audience get in touch with you to learn more about you?
Sure. Yeah. So future plans, we're going to continue, the main two threads of what we have are, continuing improving our data, continue making it easier to access and use. We have branched out as well away from IP, not away, but including our IP address data into domain data, which was a very natural extension from us. And so we launched host.io, which is, basically IPinfo for domain data. So both those places, you can check us out, IPinfo.io and host.io. Also on Twitter, IPinfo.io is our company Twitter account, where we're tweeting about some of the cool stuff that we're getting up to.
Cool. We'll add those links to our show notes for people to check you guys out. Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate you jumping on today. It was great chatting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for watching this episode and joining SaaS District today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes where we interview top leaders in the SaaS industry. If you're a SaaS company looking to grow and unlock the true value of your business, get in touch with us at Horizon Capital, and myself or one of our consultants will provide a free assessment to help you get there and hit your goals. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this podcast, please comment down below and help us improve our content for you all. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.